Welcome to the People's Forum. I'm your host, Kwame Ennis, and I have the ultimate pleasure of taking part in in the inaugural People's Forum show. I have two fantastic guests here, Mr. Xavier Basabe and Mr. Ahmed Ali Eel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have a hot topic today. The topic is going to blow your socks off. It's dealing with the NFL and that kneeling and should the players be allowed to kneel, yes or no. This is the First Amendment. What do you guys say?
Well, I have no problem with the whole situation. Unfortunately, it's been hijacked by the right and the president to sort of paint this as the players as being unpatriotic and disrespecting the flag, which is totally has nothing to do with that. This protest came out of the police shootings and a protest against trying to bring that issue to light. And this has totally been turned around and made like these players are being disrespecting the troops, disrespecting the flag and America. And I think they have a perfect right to demonstrate under the First Amendment. And this is something that the NFL, right now they're dealing with the issue in a way that right now is I think is caving in to the president right now.
And your take, Mr. Hill?
As per a previous discussion, I actually agree with Xavier. I think that it's a way to try to limit protests. And again, my skepticism lies in terms of all of this riled up patriotism behind sports in general, but really football now. I mean, this is about 10 years old. Again, this began when the Pentagon decided to start allocating money towards the NFL, and in order to have them sing the national anthem in an effort to have young men and women employed within the service. So all of this patriotism is newfound. And the other question is, and just on the level of patriotism, the other question is how many of these people who are watching the game are actually sitting behind the screen, standing up, singing the national anthem?
Exactly.
That's another question that I have. So again, with the kneeling. There's nothing unpatriotic about kneeling. It doesn't violate the First Amendment, as we were speaking about earlier. There's no clear and present danger. So like I said, there's only about 4 different forms of speech that the First Amendment doesn't allow, and kneeling most certainly is not one of them.
Well, let me say one thing in terms of that. The U.S. Code, there's actually written instructions for how to treat the flag, how the flag is supposed to be displayed, how the flag is supposed to be folded, what you're supposed to do, what you can and cannot do with the flag is in the U.S. Code. So the flag being horizontal, held up in the air by anybody they want to bring onto the field, they sing a national anthem. The national anthem is generally sung in a dignified cadence, but we've seen the national anthem as sung by Miss Barr herself, as part of a comedy routine.
Absolutely.
And how patriotic was that? And I'm not going to shy away from it. I don't think that our president is very patriotic at all. I think he's opportunistic, because if he was patriotic, he would have served this country when they asked him 5 times. So I want to bring it back to Colin, though. Fantastic individual. He was a starting quarterback in the NFL for quite some number of years. He was, if my memory serves me correctly, he was a Super Bowl starting quarterback a few years ago,
Absolutely.
in which unfortunately they lost. And it just seems like his skill level never weighted, except when all of a sudden he started to take a knee. Once he starts to take a knee, his completion level isn't what it should be. Once he starts to take a knee, his interceptions are up. There's some reason why he shouldn't be on the field, and then ultimately a reason why his contract shouldn't be honored and he should be cut and he should be released from the NFL totally. I don't believe he has a right to work, and I think he has a very, very strong case. And I think ultimately in the years to come, we're going to find out that Mr. Kaepernick is going to win his situation.
Agreed.
Any thoughts on Ms. Barr?
Well, I think ABC made the right decision in canceling the show. I think right now in this day and age, any of these public expressions of racism, anti-gay, anti-women, this should be severely punished. I mean, people speak of the First Amendment, but she has every right to say it, but that doesn't mean that she has a right. ABC has a right to condone it, since this is a business. And I believe if any one of us were to say something like this in our own office or workplace, you will be immediately dealt with. And I think the right decision was made in her case.
There are two rules I think that always apply. And the first rule I like to say is, what if that were happening to my mother or my daughter? Whenever you put it in that context, immediately everybody seems to understand it. And the other rule is a civilization rule. We should not treat anyone at any time in any place like we wouldn't want to be treated ourselves. I don't remember who the politician was, but they often say that societies are judged by how you treat the poorest, the weakest. We claim to want the poor. We want your wretched. We want your, as it says, the Statue of Liberty. But in actuality, we don't want anybody under this current administration.
Right. I actually think that when it comes to Roseann, I think that, to be very honest with you, I think ABC did the right thing. That was the network, right? ABC?
Yes.
Okay, I think ABC did the right thing in terminating her. But at the same token, like, I don't give any extra credit to ABC, because ABC is the one that hired her, and this isn't her first time that her hand has been caught in a cookie jar. Back in 2012, these were the same similar comments that she made in regards to Susan Rice, who was, and Susan Rice is not my favorite person, but this is the same comments that she made towards Susan Rice, who was appointed by Obama at that point. So this isn't anything new, and there's been quite a few times that she's done it. But ABC's insatiable need and insatiable greed for ratings, is what compelled them to actually give this woman a shot. And I think that they knew her track record from the beginning. So that's why it's really hard for me to give them credit in regards to them terminating her, because this was something that was just bound to happen.
So they're really just answering to the advertising dollars and being decent just by default.
That's a perfect way of putting it. Decent by default.
Decent by default. Okay, and we give them no kudos for that. How about you? You know what? I'm sorry. I apologize. What I should have done is let each of these gentlemen give you a little bit of their backgrounds. I'm going to start with the left here, with Mr. Basabe. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I understand that you're a community activist, social activist. Please tell us something about yourself.
Yes, hi. Well, I'm a social commentator online, comment on current events and news events. I also been a long time activist and with political parties and social activism. So right now, this is mostly what I do is sort of like only, comment on things that are going on. And I'm not really, I don't come from a right or left perspective. I try to do what makes sense, and what common sense is, lacking a lot these days. Everybody's trying to be a tribe and go either left or right. So trying to find that middle ground and, common sense solutions to our problems.
I have a question. Where do those values come from? What's your background?
Well, I have a diverse experience politically. I sort of came from mainstream, far left politics at one time, but over the years I've come to realize that a lot of there's good ideas on both sides of the aisle, and that's what basically I strive to do now, is just explore the situations and come up with a common sense solution.
Okay. And yourself?
And not to just segue off of what the gentleman just said, but he makes a very good point. That's what I've been doing for the past couple of years is actually, I guess you would term it voter education at this point. and not so much just trying to get people to vote, but trying to get people to understand the importance of voting and the purpose of doing it. So that's been what I've been doing, and to segue off of what he just said, it's not a right or a left thing. It's a issue orientated thing. Most people don't realize that they have the same issues in life. When you remove all the labels behind it. But basically, so I work with the community. Me and a few other brothers. We get together. We work with the community. We do voting petitions. What we try to do is engage the community into a voting block, and so that we can have a stronger effect on the process.
Okay, and I'm more fortunate than you viewers. I know a few of the gentlemen he's talking about. There's situations in this state where they've actually put that into practice.
Right.
In Syracuse, New York, they actually had a ballot initiative. They put a gentleman on the ballot. They were actually able to get the proper number of signatures and actually vote him into office. And
He's actually the incumbent at this point right now, Khalid Bey, and it was Sharif Bey behind his group, Operation Proclamation. Absolutely.
so there's in terms of your community, whether it's your local school board, whether it's your aldermen, assemblymen, whatever it is, you do have the right to vote people in or out. If there's something that is against your best interests, whether you are quote unquote liberal, Democrat, Republican, conservative, whatever that title, just look at your own best interests. Look at how it serves your community, your children, and be guided, by of course, first your heart and then your mind.
That's right, yeah. They see that a lot, people voting against their own interests. They let these politicians convince them that certain policies are going to help you when actually they are going to hurt you, and who's going to benefit is going to be their own patrons, people who donate the big money to their campaigns, and that's who they're basically writing the laws for. So I think people should, try to educate themselves, and also this is, the job of a lot of activists, I think, in the community, just trying to get people to, identify who's going to be in their interest.
Just to kind of wrap this segment up, in a perfect world, what would you have the players do? What would you have the owners do? In a perfect world, in 1 minute or less, what would you have them do?
Well, in a perfect world, I think the owners, there was a time when, the owners should stay out of just, enforcing any kind of rules as far as protests are concerned. There were certain players who were participating in the protests. There were some who were not. And I think towards the end of the season, this issue was starting to, become a non-issue. And I think they exacerbated by doing these new rules.
I agree. Okay, 20 seconds before we go to break.
I really don't understand like the whole collective bargaining rights between association, a 501c6 and a 501c7, which is what the NFL is, a club, an association. But I agree with the gentleman when he says that I think the owners should not interfere or infringe on anyone's First Amendment rights.
Okay, we're going to come back in the next segment. We'll be talking about possibly the Constitution, First Amendment, Second Amendment, different things. Be right back.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. I have a mentor, and she convinced me to continue my education.
No one receives a diploma alone.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Do you want to retire like a champ? Just like legendary basketball star Uncle Drew?
Don't do it like that, Uncle Drew.
You're already acing the game. You've got your dream ride.
Don't be slamming my door.
Sorry about that.
You just did the same.
Gotta get the boys. Your dream vacation and your dream team. And now you can make your retirement just as legendary.
I get buckets.
Get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
Okay, we're back. As I said, we were going to start with the First Amendment, and that's going to be a ground ball for Mr. L here. Please, could you give us a little bit of legal parameters on what the First Amendment is?
Yeah, just to make it really easy, it's one of your most basic but most important freedoms that you have. It's the freedom of speech, but it's also the freedom of religion, and it's the freedom to act within either one of these functions. So, speech can can mean a lot of different things when it comes to the First Amendment. So, for example, like I don't know if everybody's aware, but in terms of what's happening with our voting system right now money could be donated to a campaign, and the money is donated to a campaign is actually protected under the First Amendment because it's protected as speech. It's protected as a form of speech. But it's also, but again, the First Amendment is also a freedom of religion. But it doesn't necessarily mean when you have the freedom of speech, and this is the problem, it's too vague and too arbitrary for some people who haven't looked at it. It doesn't mean that you can say anything you want. That's not what freedom of speech means. Freedom of speech actually inquires a responsibility. And that responsibility means that you can't say things that especially on a public forum, you can't say things that will cause an alarm. You can't yell bomb on a plane. I think everybody's familiar with that one. You can't, you can't say bomb on a plane. You can't degrade or ruin someone else's reputation. I mean, they have laws on the books. When you do things like that you can be prosecuted for. So it lets you know that all speech isn't legal. All speech, you just can't say anything you want.
Okay, all right.
Right, exactly. I agree totally. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't, go around trying to incite violence, and also the thing also like the Ahmed just mentioned. Libeling people, going around, and I think also it's just just the civility. A lot of throwing around racist stereotypes, that type of thing is just the kind of speech that's not protected. I don't think the founding fathers meant for that speech to be protected under the Constitution. That's not what the intent is.
There are many in the African American community that say all these players are doing is exercising their First Amendment right. They're doing it peacefully. They're not causing any alarm, and they're doing it in a uniform fashion. Should a player have his right to work taken away? Should he be fired? Should he be sent away from the NFL into exile for exercising his First Amendment right? And I take you back to I believe it was 68, when Jim Brown and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and all of those other political but sports figures got together and sat around at a table just like this and had this same discussion, some 50, 55 years ago. And we're back at it again. What do you think about that?
Right. Well, I mean, the NFL it is a private business, and I mean, there's a certain image they want to project. So unfortunately, I think that it is within their right to sort of censor and fire players who don't live up to what they want to present. But I think the players on their private life, once they're off the field, have every right to comment on social issues and do political activism.
I believe that's a slippery slope, because if these players who have resources, most of them are brands by themselves. If they were to actually put their resources together and come on the social media or any sort of public forum and start to express themselves, I believe the right would still have a problem with that.
Oh, absolutely.
The right seems to have a problem with any dissent at any time. Our president came on television approximately 2 days ago and claimed that he wanted his people to be in lockstep and to be shaking their heads like the people in North Korea. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I agree. I mean, that's the problem we have right now. We have a situation like North Korea where you have certain people like somebody we're going to talk about later, like Candace Owens, demanding total loyalty and admiration and love for our leader, which I think is something, we're going down, the fascism route, right now. So I really, that's something that to be concerned about.
We should always be able to speak truth to power. Public should never be silenced. If anybody remembers the French Revolution, they silenced the public, and then eventually the public silenced them. All right, so
Just piggybacking off of what he said, you know, it's true. The NFL is a private organization. At the same time, what we have to realize is this becomes another legal matter in terms of where policy can preempt constitutional law, and you know, policy wouldn't exist if it weren't for constitutional law. So it's almost like you're putting the chicken before the egg, or you know, it's the backwards and forwards game that you know that we begin to see. So in terms of, and I agree that you know that the players may not be able to say certain things within the private confines of the organization. But when we do things like kneeling, something as simple as kneeling, like a silent protest, if the owners of the organization can somehow create this to be offensive, then it's completely arbitrary. If I'm drinking water at a fountain, that could be offensive. Like, you know, where do you draw the line? Like you said, a slippery slope earlier. It's where do you draw the line? I just wanted to piggyback off of that.
I think the Players Association, along with some of the coaches, came up with a great solution. If this issue was entirely polarizing and is going to anger the paying public, anger the advertisers, anger everybody, they says, listen, we'll stay in the tunnel, we'll stay in the locker room, and we'll come out after the anthem and play the game. You know, so I think that was a compromise worth listening to. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of these things were collectively bargained. I believe a few years ago, the NFL, the Players Association, gave away the sink, the bathwater, and the kids.
See, and yeah.
Just for a contract. And many times during contract negotiations, the union heads always say, well, we locked in your money. We locked in your benefits. We locked in all of these things. And we had to give up, you know, a few things. And generally, what do? They sell the young.
Right.
You know,
Right.
It doesn't look bad until the young grow up.
Right.
You know, they don't have any heads and any arms. You know, then it looks horrible. So I want to get back to an important question dealing with this same thing. Conservatism, liberalism, what are they?
I think it's just a tribal thing. I think it's just people have play politics sort of like if it was a team that you're following, instead of thinking and that's a herd mentality in I think with the right and the left where someone says something and then either you attack them or you follow them blindly. And I think, you know, the problem is a lot of people are not thinking for themselves and they're sort of following the same media where they're not getting different perspectives on an issue. They're getting whatever, you know, whatever the right thinks or whatever the left thinks, and then you sort of stay within that context.
Yeah, earlier we mentioned Candace Owens. She is picking up a lot of interest. She's a conservative, a female African-American conservative. I'd like to ask a question. What is she trying to conserve?
See, that's a really good question because again, to piggyback on, I'm sorry I keep piggybacking off your comment, but to piggyback off his comment, he's absolutely right. It's a sheepish mentality, and it doesn't give the true ideal of what's going on. Conservatism, as you just said, is something you're trying to conserve, something you're trying to preserve, something you're trying to keep.
But if these things were bad.
So, and this is my thing. So when we look at somebody, the great abolitionist like Frederick Douglass, okay, we're talking about a conservative. We're talking about a person that wants to do for themselves, have least outside involvement as possible
From government.
from government or from anybody. You know, he wanted the least outside involvement. He wanted people to be able to, and I hate to use this term, but pick themselves up by the bootstrap. Right? I hate using that term, but he wanted people to, and specifically African American people, to be able to do that. So when you have someone that comes on like a Candace, was it Candace Owens? That's her
Yes.
name. Yeah, this is like a false sense of conservatism. What this is that she's an African American female neocon, wannabe neocon. She's trying to fit a circle into a square. There's no space for her in that space. Like it doesn't exist, and they don't have the history behind it. I just want to say really quickly, a good portion of this what she's following is something that was created from what's known as the Powell Memorandum, the Lewis Powell Memorandum. And what this was a Supreme Court justice who decided that corporations needed their own platform. And that's where the whole neocon ideology comes from. In a nutshell, I'm sorry.
Another question. Our younger listeners hopefully will email and they'll write in about this. What do you feel about Kanye and Kim? Number one, Kanye being conservative on the Republican side of things. Kim stepping up very much so in terms of prison reform, bail reform, and things of that nature. And Kim being at the White House. Speak to that.
First, when it comes to Kanye, in terms of whether he's a conservative or a liberal, it doesn't matter to me. Kanye is not anybody that's ever, and no disrespect to him, he's an excellent entertainer, but he's not anybody that I've ever looked to for insight in terms of making a good political decision. So whatever he is, it doesn't even matter, and it shouldn't matter to other people, working families that are out there trying to make ends meet and trying to make the right political choices. As far as Kim, and I hate to say this, but to me, it looks more of like a photo opportunity more so than anything else. Now, don't get me wrong, the issue that she's speaking to is extremely important, extremely important. I mean, I also just watched The Last President, who I had a lot of issues with Obama, but I just watched him commute over, 60 sentences. And, because this young lady came and she did one, there's all of this press. There's all of this press for it. So I get a little confused with things of that nature.
Do you think reality TV stars, musicians, even academics, do you think that they should really dictate public policy?
No, not at all. I think they have the right to say what they want. Like Ahmed just mentioned. Kanye West has the right to. He has the public microphone, so he could say what he wants, but it's up to us now what the kind of importance we give to what they say. I think people, they not a lot of people. I guess the press does. They sort of like amplify, and like if this is something profound, but these are not people who are qualified really to for us. I mean, qualified for us to sort of give any credibility to, as far as public policy.
Okay, we've got 30 seconds in this last segment. I just want to say two things. The first thing I want to say is to former President Ronald Reagan, nothing trickles down. When you're in the desert and you're thirsty and you're waiting on that trickle of water and it comes down, you're still gonna die. And lastly, with the pull yourself up by your bootstraps, if you don't have on shoes, Mr. President, really, what are you talking about? You're talking about rich getting richer, poor getting poorer. Stop sending our jobs. Stop sending all of our resources out of the country. Stop paying our farmers not to produce food. Stop sending all of the technical jobs to India and to China. Actually build and invest in the infrastructure right here in the U.S. Thank you very much. We'll be back next time.